Welcome to the Charron Zone. I am with the actual most interesting man in the world, Mr. Bill O'Hanlon. How are you, Bill?
I'm doing well, thank you. That's
All
very
right.
nice.
So Bill really is a very interesting person, and that's why I wanted to have him on. So I'm gonna read some of his accomplishments, and then Bill, I'm gonna ask you to elaborate a little bit on what you've been doing lately. So Bill has published over 39 books, and he's working on his number 40. He's a psychotherapist. He's a coach. He's a public speaker. Speaks all over the world. He's a songwriter, and he was featured on Oprah, and that is Oprah Winfrey, just in case you don't know which Oprah I'm referring to. So Bill, after having said that, if you could just elaborate on what you've been up to lately and all these incredible things that you do.
Well, I'll give you a few things. I mean, one is that I have a friend in England. As you mentioned, I travel around the world and teach workshops. And I've been to England a bunch of times, and usually it's the same people that bring me. Sometimes it changes, but I have this really good friend in the north of England, and a little place called Whaley. And she once said to me, I'm a lifelong learner. And I thought, oh, that's it. That's what I am. I really love to learn. And once I master something, I take it as far as I can, but I want to learn something new as well. And so that sort of explains this weird kind of varied career where I really take something to the end. I became a psychotherapist partly out of curiosity and interest in human beings and how people tick and how people work, but also I was very anxious when I was a young kid, and then I got depressed when I got to university and almost did myself in. It's a long story, I won't go into it, but I became really interested in how people get out of problem places when they, I was so depressed I could barely get out of bed. And then I found a way to get out of bed. I found meaning and purpose and connections with other people. I was pretty isolated. And that led me into being a psychotherapist. When I became a psychotherapist, I got really upset when I was trained as a psychotherapist because it was mostly focused on what was wrong with people. Mm-hmm. And if I'd gone to therapy, I couldn't even get it together to go to therapy when I was depressed, but if I'd gone to therapy and someone was really focused on what was wrong with me and my terrible traumas and my childhood that was bad and all this stuff, I don't know if I would have made it. I didn't need that. I was already focused enough on what was wrong with the world and with me. And so I got upset, so upset that even as a very young therapist in my 20s, when I first got out of graduate school, I started to argue with people in the field. And then I thought, well, who do they listen to? They listen to people who speak, are the experts and who write books. And so I thought, well, I'm a terrible writer. I'm restless. I'm a little distractible. Let's just say that I don't like diagnoses, but I'm a little distractible. I'm on that side of the spectrum, and I'm shy and I'm terrified of public speaking, but I overcame both of those things because I had such a passion for getting my ideas out there that were more strength-oriented, solution-oriented, positive-oriented, rather than what was wrong with people. And so that took me very far. I didn't know how to write a book, but I figured it out. And as you said, I've figured it out to the tune of 39 times. I'm on my 40th book at this point. So I just had all this stuff I wanted to put out in the world. And I wanted to help other people by being a therapist and by being an author and a speaker. And I travel around the world. I've given over 3,500 talks in 27 countries or something like that, and a bunch of continents. And I just kept getting really interested in stuff. And then that would take me to the next thing, like public speaking. People would come up to me and say, "Where's your book?" And I go, "Oh, no, I don't know how to write a book." And they say, no, we need a book of the stuff you're talking about. Okay, I got to figure out how to write a book. It really was, the world sort of pulled me to what I did. And then I did that for a long time, and I was public speaking and writing books, and I had a family, and I had, a busy life. I had a psychotherapy practice, and I would just pedal to the metal all the time, busy. And I thought, I read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week, and I'm like,
yes.
Okay, if I'm so smart, why am I working all the time? I'm making good money. I made a really good living, but I was constantly busy and over busy, committed, where even when I went to bed, there were things I hadn't finished and my schedule was filled up. And I thought, I'm smart. I can learn this new thing, how to do the work that I love and not be so crazy busy. So I thought, well, everything's going online. And if you create stuff online, you can do it once, record it, and sell it again and again, and give it to people again and again. So I spent about 4 years, even though I'm not a digital native, figuring out how to put my stuff online, and then the more challenging thing, which is how to market it. Marketing wasn't, as a psychotherapist, that wasn't my strong suit, and I just dove into this world of internet marketing and found ways to do it. And I was a hippie when I was younger, and I was terrible with money. And I figured out a way to make so much money, even with my terrible, and I started educating myself about money and finances, even with my terrible money patterns, I made more money than I could put myself into debt over, and I got out of debt. I paid off all my debts. I paid off my house, my mortgage. I paid it off 10 years earlier than I expected. I saved about as much money as I think I'll need for retirement. And so that was a little shocking thing to me. And so learning all that was really cool. And I was helping other people, and this time I had swaths of time on my calendar, where it used to be I was always scheduled, and every minute I was supposed to be doing something else. And out of that emerged an old dream of mine, which is sort of how we connected, because it was music. And I was a singer-songwriter when I was younger, again in my hippie days. And then I went on to university and decided, I'll be a therapist, not a singer-songwriter. It's a more stable career, and I was shy, and I wasn't very good at managing my career, getting gigs, as you're so good at. And so I when I had all this time, I had 2 unfinished earlier dreams. I've written a bunch of nonfiction books, but I want to write a novel. The other thing is I wanted to do songwriting. I didn't want to travel around and be an artist anymore because I traveled so much to being a speaker. Mm-hmm. And I just decided I'm going to see if I can make this songwriting thing work. And about 3.5 years ago, I got really serious. I just Googled songwriting workshops, and I started to go to people who were amazing hit songwriters, some of whom we know in common, Marty Dodson and Clay Mills, who started Songtown, an online site, and we connected through that site, and then through our mutual friend Michael Elsner. And
to throw out a plug for Marty and Clay, Songtown, if anybody is interested in becoming a great songwriter and learning from the best, they're
basically the best. What they said was, when I first went to Nashville, which is where they're located, it's an online place, so you can join from anywhere. But I started going to Nashville because that's where writing is the highest quality in the world. I mean, there's great writers in London and New York and LA, but boy, Nashville has some of the best writers in the world who also know how to co-write, which I'd never done in my life. And I was learning to co-write. And Marty and Clay, who are hit songwriters, said, first of all, only learn from people that are doing it right now, not people who used to do it. Secondly, your task is to learn to write great songs. Because when I first went to Nashville, I thought, I got to get people to hear my songs and they'll record them. And they said, no, put your head down and learn to write songs. And it's like that, that 10,000 hour thing that we hear so much about. Just do the thing, which is how I learned to speak and how I learned to write and how I learned to do online stuff. I just sat down and did it for hours and hours and hours, and you do it and you make mistakes and you fall on your face and you get up and learn something new. So I've spent the last 3.5 years feeling like I'm in graduate school, like I was for my psychotherapy degree, in songwriting school, and I just have written 163 songs. I wrote one right before you and I jumped on here to record this. And a friend of mine just said, I've got an idea. Do you have time? And I was, yep, okay. We just wrote a song. So just getting that 10,000 hours in, and then getting feedback from people to tell you how to make them better. And so I have mentors and people that I run them by, and I've had the time of my life. And the last few books that I've written were with hit songwriters Clay Mills and Marty Dodson on how to co-write how to write lyrics in a really great way. I have a book called Song Building, and then I'm just finished one with Clay, which is called Mastering Melody Writing, and then we're writing one on the business of songwriting for songwriters. So that'll be my 40th.
Fantastic. So that the one that you're working on now is the business of songwriting?
Yeah, that's when I just started. Actually, I've written a chapter and a half, and I'm going to go away for a few weeks, and I'll probably write. I'm a pretty fast writer these days. It took me 3 years to write my first book. Now it's a matter of weeks or months. Once I know what I want to write, I'm a fast writer. So I'll probably have that one finished in a month or so, and then it'll be out next year. The last two will be out next year. The first two are already out. So the one's called Song Building, and the other one's called Songwriter's Guide to Co-Writing, Mastering Co-Writing.
Wow.
Yeah,
Excellent.
so most of the other books were about psychotherapy or self-help, and the one that got me on Oprah was called Do One Thing Different, which was about how to make one small change to make a bigger change in your life. And
I have that book right there. Right
there you go. Oprah had me on her show for an hour, and it sold a boatload of books. Thank you, Oprah. And yeah, that was cool.
So yeah, cool. Can you just tell everybody a little bit about that? Like how did that come about? How did Oprah discover you?
Well, I'd written books for psychotherapists, which are smaller books. I mean, it's a few $1,000 advance and easier to get them published. And they're nonfiction books. They're just about my psychotherapy ideas. And, again, I said I was passionate about that and wanted to change my field. And then I got pretty good at writing after writing about 20 books. And I started to get the hang of it. Yeah. And so one of an agent in New York called up one of my publishers, which was W.W. Norton, and said, do you have any psychotherapists that write psychotherapy books but are ready to write for the general public? And she said, yeah, I've got one, Bill O'Hanlon. And so he called me, and I wrote my first general public book, which was called Love is a Verb. And then I got another agent, and in the second agent, I had this book, Do One Thing Different. And HarperCollins picked it up. Morrow is an imprint of HarperCollins. And I said, what do I need to do to get this book on Oprah? Because I think everybody should read it. It's got some really good ideas. And she said, Bill, she said, every author wants to be on Oprah. You're probably not going to be on Oprah. Just give it up. And I'm like, I'm not going to give it up. I'm going for it.
I love this story already. I love this.
And she said, look, I'll tell you, we've had enthusiastic authors like you at Harper before, and they'll bug Oprah's people so much. Oprah's people threatened they'd never put another HarperCollins book on if we didn't call off the dogs. That is, you can't call up the Oprah people. You can't lobby them, nothing. I'm like, oh, geez, what am I supposed to do? I said, what are you going to do? She said, well, we'll send them a book with a press kit. And I'm like, that's it? I'm just with the 1,000 other books they get every day. And so she said, well, that's all we're going to do. Okay. So a couple months later, she called me and said, Oprah's producer wants to talk to you right now, and she's leaving in 15 minutes. I'm hanging up the phone. Call her now. Boom. She gave me the information. I called her, and they had me on, and I asked the producer later. I said, what happened? She said, Oprah really was mad because they were trying to change people's lives. They called their show at the time Change My Life Television, Change Your Life Television. Mm-hmm. And she said they'd sometimes send Molly maids out to clean people's houses, and they'd send chauffeurs to take the kids to soccer for a beleaguered mother. And then they'd go back 3 weeks later, and the woman's life was worse because she'd had 15 minutes of fame on Oprah, and nothing had changed. And Oprah said, we aren't changing people's lives. We were just helping them. And we want to change and transform people's lives. So let's do one thing in each show that gives our viewers something that empowers them and changes their life. My book had arrived that day, and the producer picks it up, and it's got this here. I've got it back here. It's got this pretty big cover, which is easy to read across. Do one thing different. And Oprah just looks at the producer and says, that's what I'm talking about. Book him. And I'm like, it was kismet. It was fate.
Oh my God.
It's great. And so, and I thought, well, I'll be on with several other people. I was featured on the show, and they called the show Do One Thing Differently. They showed it once, sold 30,000 books. They showed another time as a replay, 3 months later, it sold another 30,000 books. My publisher was jumping up and down. I mean, average book sells 5 to 10,000. You know, it doesn't go very well. And they're like, okay. And then they bought me a 40 city radio satellite interview where I sit in my bedroom and I'm talking, you know, at 5 in the morning. I had to get up, you know, because it's drive time in the East Coast, and I was in the Mountain Time Zone. I'm in New Mexico, and I would just do 5-6 minute interviews, 20 in a row.
Oh, wow.
With John and Naveen in the morning, and we had Bill O'Hanlon who's coming on after the break, and he's going to tell us how getting naked can change your life. It was a lot of.
Is that in the book?
That is in the book.
Ah.
In fact, these DJs, these morning DJs, must have flipped through my book, because I'm sure they don't have time to read everybody's book, and come across the word sex once and naked another time, and they would almost all of them honed in on those 2 stories that were in the book. Well, one was about sex and doing the dishes, so you'll have to read the book to find out what that's about. The other one was about getting naked to change an argument, and bathtubs. So you'll have to read the book to find out. That's
so everybody grab that book so that you can find out how getting naked,
sex and dishes, and getting naked and arguments, stopping arguments. It's great. No, but there's a lot of other stuff in that book besides the sex and naked stuff. But man, did those morning DJs or evening DJs, because I did drive times this morning or the evening. That's when, I guess that's when most people listen to radio. And I did 40 of those. By the end of that, I wanted to rewrite the book. I'm like, man, I could have made this book a lot easier and simpler, because now I know the 3 or 4 stories that really land and get the point across. And I know the 4 talking points for that book. And it was great. I mean, I loved doing that. It was absolutely fun. So I've written 3 or 4 other books that were for the general public. A lot of my books were for psychotherapists. 3 or 4 for the general public, and then the ones on songwriting are for songwriters. So,
fantastic! It's incredible. It's amazing stuff. We were speaking earlier today about basically pursuing your passion, and with you, that's one reason why I think it's, you know, your story is so interesting, is that you've pursued your passion with, you know, reckless abandon, and then those passions have changed throughout the years. And I think, you know, maybe a lot of people have the idea that, you know, they need to discover their passion, somehow unlock the, you know, the secret to what their passion is, and that has to be their passion for, you know, since they're 18, you know, because when you're young you think like, oh well, there's got to be this big calling that I have, but I just don't know what it is. But when you, the thought is that when you do discover it, that's going to be your passion for the rest of your life. And you're a great example of, well, you know, people change, and your
I think
your
some
focus
people
has
do
changed.
have that one thing. I mean, there was some movie City Slickers, if you go back and watch it, with Billy Crystal years ago, and there's this guy who's this ranch hand that, you know, is really cool, and Billy Crystal's all a neurotic mess, and his marriage is in crisis, his career's in crisis, and he says, "You seem so happy," he says to Curly, who's the ranch hand. He goes, "What's your secret?" He goes, "What does that mean?" He said, "One thing. I found one thing I loved and I was good at." And for some people, that's it. But I mean, look at you. I mean, I don't know we don't know each other that well, but I know you've done music and you performed and written music, but you also have a passion to helping other people. So the podcast, and you mastered through your pursuit of your passion for music and performing music, how to get gigs and how to be an opening act for really big acts. And, you know, you have developed an expertise, and now you want to share that. Well, that's what happened for me. You know, I became a therapist, and that was an early passion. And then I started to speak because I had a passion to change my field. Then I started to write, that came out of that. And I've just followed those serial passions. I think there are 4 signals, and they change a little over life, that tell you what you're supposed to do. And the 4 signals for me are blissed, blessed, pissed, and dissed.
I love this.
Blissed is something like what you love music. I love music. So that's a bliss for us. You know, Steven Spielberg, he wasn't a very good student. I guess he had some learning disabilities. Convinced his parents when he was a teenager to buy him a Super 8 camera. immediately started making full-length movies. I mean, if you'd given me a camera when I was a kid, I would have made some silly little videos that would have been 2 minutes long. He made full-length movies with all the neighborhood kids and his brothers and sisters. And it's like, wow, that's your bliss. You found something you just love, and he just thrived in that arena. So that's bliss. Pretty easy if you know that, if music is your bliss or whatever it may be. And then blessed. Like you find a mentor or somebody who says, wow, Tim, you're great with me. You should do that as a full-time living. You're like, what? I thought that was a hobby. Wow, okay. You find somebody who believes in you, encourages you. Maybe that's Midge, maybe that's a friend. Maybe that's that's a mentor of some kind, some music mentor or somebody who just hears, or even somebody randomly who comes up and hears you play and says, man, you ought to be on the radio, and you're like, really? I think that too, but somebody else believes in me? Right. So they blessed you. Somebody blessed you by believing in you and encouraging you. So it's blissed and blessed. Those are the positive sides of the energies that tell you what to do with your life. Then there's pissed. That's what happened for me. I became a therapist, and I was pissed. They were so focused on what was wrong with people. I'm like, there's a whole other side to people. I mean, yeah, people are all screwed up, and they're amazing too. So let's recognize the amazing part and help them tap into that to change when they're stuck or when they're depressed or anxious or sad or having relationship difficulties.
I'm actually getting goosebumps. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm getting goosebumps when you say that, because it's what a powerful, just a powerful way of looking at things. Yeah, people are messed up and people are amazing, and if we take a little more time to focus on the amazing parts, then what you focus on seems to flourish.
Expand, of course, yeah, as usual. And you can't deny the messed up parts, but you can balance it a bit. And that's what I wanted to do. So I created a whole approach to change called the solution-oriented approach, or the strength-based approach. And then the fourth energy or signal that tells you what you're supposed to do in a particular moment or for your next phase in life is dist. And that is when someone disrespects you or wounds you or hurts you. I was playing in a bar one time when I was early on, a singer-songwriter, and people were always, they just wanted me to play Margaritaville at the time, which was a big song, in bars. And I took a break and I came back and they were playing the Beatles, and the bar was super crowded, and someone said, wow, this music is so great. And the other person said, yeah, wait till this guy gets back up here who's been playing. He's terrible. And I was like, oh, that hurt so badly. And I've determined I'm going to get better, so good that they're going to be, hey, I want to hear that guy like I want to hear the Beatles. And so when I'm writing my songs, I hold myself to a high standard. But so a wound and being pissed, those are sort of negative energies. You have to transform them to do something productive and positive that helps yourself and other people. So you can't just show up with the AK-40, 45 or whatever, and 47 and shoot people at a school or at work. If you've been dissed or somebody's hurt you or bullied you, you can grow up to do anti-bullying songs.
Absolutely. Right? And I call this is a whole philosophy of mine. I call it revenge success, where
that's it.
You don't do anything physical or anything like that. You don't do anything to that person or even respond, but what I've done and is really partially responsible for me booking gigs was I would literally, something would happen, band members, I have a particular story, band members screwed me over in very big high pressure situations, and I would write their names in my day planner, and the next day, and I would do this. I used this for years. These people.
Right.
I said I'm gonna call every venue that I can call now, because the bottom line, and for what I do as an independent musician, the big leverage point is booking gigs, and that's how your success is gauged. So I
Right.
said, I'm going to
You're using
outbook
those
these
people who dissed you. You're using those people who dissed you
Yep.
as energy and fuel
fuel.
for doing the next thing.
Exactly.
Except, and as you say, you could have sunk into a depression. Like, why do people screw up? The music business is so corrupt and people are so two-faced. Yeah, I mean, you probably had moments of that. But then you go, okay, great. That happened. Now how can I use that to fuel my career and my success? And so that's, to me, why when you said, oh, you've changed because the energy changes over life.
Yep.
You know, you get in a band and you're blissed about music, and all of a sudden somebody screws you over and you're dissed. Now how are you gonna change what you do? And you know, the stuff about bullying that, you know, you've been involved in, helping people who are bullied, you know, that's cool stuff. You've transformed that negative energy of being dissed or pissed into positive and productive and success energy. So for me, there's always this moving dance of the energies in the world. I put myself out in the world, and then I get feedback. You know, someone says, you suck, or that song is terrible, or you're not that good. Okay, well, then I'm going to get better. Your band member screws you over, and you go, okay, I'm using that, and I'm going to show them. I'm going to use that as my success fuel. And that, for me, is what's happened to me through my whole life. And then sometimes you just get done with the last thing you were doing. It's like, well, you know, I've done that. I've declared that, you know, I make thousands of dollars a day as a speaker. And I still get invitations. And I've started turning them down because I want to have time to do my songwriting. And I've declared that next year, in December, is the last time I'm going to take one of those. I was booked up for like 3 or 4 years in advance, so it took me a little while to extract myself. But I'm not going to do that anymore because I'm so focused on what I love, this music stuff, and that's my next thing. And that's how I kept myself alive. And I go to Nashville, and I'm in my mid to late 60s, let's say that, and it was my birthday one time when I was down there, and someone said, oh, you just had a birthday recently, and I said, yeah, and they said, how old were you? And I mentioned I was in my mid to late 60s, and one of my co-writers who's in his 30s said, what? You can't be that old. And I said, well, you know, I've got a lot of energy. I love what I do, and that keeps me alive. I mean, you know, it's the white hair, you know, you'd think people would know how old I am, but people mistake me for a lot younger because of my energy, and I think it's the energy that you need to tap into. I haven't worked for anybody else since 1981, and I love my life, and I made it up, which you do all the time, and it's scary to make up your life because, like, nobody's writing you a check as a salary. You have to write your own checks, if you will. You have to develop your own sources of income. And it's scary, and I love it. If you can pull it off, it's one of the greatest things in the world, if you know what you're doing and you love what you're doing. So.
Yeah, I definitely think that, you know, there's this it's not really pride, but this this feeling that you get when you're writing your own story and you start to have any kind of whatever you consider success. I guess it is pride, but it's just this contentment that you know that you forged your own path, and you kind of you built it yourself, and you're self-sufficient. It really means a lot. It's a great.
Well, nobody can pull the rug totally out from under you. You know, if you worked for IBM for years, you had a job for life, and then about in the 90s they said, "Oh, sorry, you don't have a job for life anymore. Goodbye." And so, you know, it used to be those jobs were security. Now, the way the economy changes so fast, your most security is to take control of your music or your career in whatever way, your freelance career in a certain way. And if you can learn to manage that and manage the terrifying moments when there's no money and there's no work coming in and all that stuff, there's a roller coaster at first. But after, you know, a number of years of that, I just learned to ride through those roller coaster things. And then after a while, success builds on success, and you don't have such financial and work kind of stresses with it. And it's a pretty cool place to be.
Yeah, I'll tell you, for the past 6 years, I think maybe this summer, maybe last summer, but definitely this summer was the first summer that I didn't go to Smidge in the spring and be like, oh my God, I don't have enough gigs. I don't have enough gigs for the summer. What am I going to do? Just hyperventilating because you
Sure,
don't have,
it's scary. It's hard.
And the flip side of that is it forces you to, do your thing, to do
or
your thing.
Give up and go get a job. But you didn't do it. I didn't do it. I haven't done it for many decades, and I love it, because then I used to work at jobs, and at times my energy would just be so low because I didn't want to start at the time they wanted me to start. I didn't want to end at the time they wanted. I didn't want to do some of the work. Mm-hmm. Now, there's some parts of my job I don't love, or my work that I don't love, the paperwork stuff, and all the stuff you have to do, but 98% of it I absolutely love, and it energizes me. So if you can find that kind of life and make a living doing what you love, and that may change over the course of 20 years or 30 years or whatever it may be, and it has changed for me. And then you have to be a lifelong learner, because as soon as you learn something, and you're doing that right now, we've been talking about online courses and marketing, and you have to learn a whole new set of things that aren't natural for you and that aren't easy to learn. And if you can persist through that, how do you get gigs? Some people just never make it through that learning curve. They just give up. This is too hard. Right. You have to be willing to use that energy to fuel you through the dips and the ups and downs of it and the hard parts of it, and you have to be a lifelong learner. And if you're going to succeed in modern economies, you have to be a lifelong learner.
Right, and all these things are skills. Like you said, I didn't know how to write books. I didn't, I thought I was a terrible writer, and then you learned. It's a skill that you learn, just like learning to play an instrument. And that's what I try to tell people about learning to book gigs. It's just a skill that if you work on it consistently, you will undoubtedly get better and better at it. And I'm right in the middle of even today and yesterday, I'm booking these for myself. I'm booking these enormous gigs, like unbelievable opportunities. And now that stuff is 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have been, pulling my hair out like, because I didn't know what to do. Now, to go play these huge shows and to book them, it's like falling off a log. But I'm in the middle of learning all this online course stuff, and I'm in the middle of pulling my hair out and like, oh my God, am I really this stupid? Why can't I understand Kajabi? Like all this stuff.
Well, I think, you may know this research, but there was a woman named Carol Dweck who came across some people who are naturally talented at like math, let's say students. Mm-hmm. And she gave them challenging tasks and that were right at their level. And the ones who were really great natural math people did really well. Then she gave them tasks, and then she had another group that thought they weren't good at math and weren't that good at math. And she gave them the same test, and they didn't do that well. And then she gave them the new test. And before she gave them the new test, she gave them a lecture saying, you're not that good at math right now, but it's not a set quality. You can learn to be better at math. Your brain is like a muscle. And if you work that muscle out, you can get stronger at it. So it's sort of terrible. And you think about the music business. Some people are just like, they pick up a guitar and they sound like Jimi Hendrix when they pick it up. And it's like, what the hell?
I can't stand those people.
I hate those people. But the bad news is sometimes those people get such good feedback that when she went back and did the second experiment with these people, the ones who are naturally talented, when she put them in things that they weren't that good at, they gave up. They like, that's too hard. I can't do it. I'm not good at math. They pretended like they did really well and they just hid their grades. The ones who she told, hey, you got to work your muscles and this feels really hard, but if you keep doing it, like working your muscles out, you'll get better. Like going out for a jog every day. First you have to kind of walk very slowly and then jog, and then you can run after a while. Mm-hmm. And if you have that growth mindset rather than that set mindset, you can learn anything. And so I think that's the key, but you got to persist through those tough things and not tell yourself, oh, I'm no good at the online stuff. I'm no good at math. I can't learn guitar because I play piano. I'm just not that good at it. Or I play bass and I can't really do the other stuff. I can't learn how to use Logic or Pro Tools or whatever it may be because I'm just not good at that stuff. I'm not techie. If you tell yourself that stuff, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot. Whatever you need to learn, have that growth mindset. I can be a lifelong learner and I can apply myself. Now, you can't learn everything in your life, but choose the ones you do and don't let yourself get into that fixed mindset. They call it fixed mindset rather than growth mindset. So,
amazing advice. So speaking of advice, the thing that I wanted to wrap up with is, of course, the podcast is mostly for musicians, music business, DIY, up-and-coming singers, songwriters, bands, stuff like that. And I'd like to just see if you have any advice for people that are struggling to get to the next level and get to where they want to be, and maybe it's just for musicians, or it could be for just people in general. Because
I think I'm pretty into the music business, so I can understand it. But I think there is a more general thing. First thing is what I just said: adopt the growth mindset. Carol Dweck is her name, D-W-E-C-K, and she's I think she wrote a book called Mindset. And you can find that research online if you just want to go and not read the whole book.
Bill, can you repeat that for me real quick?
Yeah, it's Carol Dweck. D-W-E-C-K. She's a university professor, psychologist, educational theorist, and I think the book is called Mindset, if I remember right. And it describes that research in more detail than what I told you. So that's first thing, is develop that growth mindset. When you come up across something that's really challenging for you, focus on it. Give yourself that growth. Be willing to feel like an idiot, as you said. I can't get this. It's too hard. It's really hard. Persist through that time. So that's the first piece of advice. Second piece of advice is, in my career as a writer and in my career as a speaker, and now as in an online doing online marketing courses, and now as a songwriter, this. But I think it bears repeating. Relationships make a big difference. Be somebody who's good to hang with, who doesn't sit and complain, like you when people screwed you over. You could complain, and you should complain a little to get it off your chest, but it's not ever to complain, but then do something positive with it. Go, okay, well, if they don't like my songs, I'm going to write better songs. If they think my performance sucked, I'm going to get better performance. If, I didn't show up on time and they got mad, I'm going to start to show up on time. I mean, figure out that. Be a person who's nice to be around, who's fun to be around, who contributes, who gives without taking. You don't want to be a victim of everything and just never get anything back. But I've helped people do online courses, including you,
Yes.
Without asking for anything back. Because I figure eventually somehow it will come back to me. I don't, I have enough, and somehow it'll come back to me. So be a person who gives more than you take. Be a person who's fun to hang around with. Be a person who's kind of positive, who goes, okay, that sucked. Let's not do that again, and let's figure out how to do it better, and be a little more fun about it and a little more positive about it. So I think relationships, along with your work ethic and being willing to be stupid and not know and learn and persist through the hard parts, those two things combined, unbeatable.
Amen. Absolutely brilliant. This is why Bill O'Hanlon is the most interesting man in the world, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. So I can't thank you enough for being on here. I think this is going to be very, very valuable and helpful for whoever listens and watches it. And if you could let people know where they can check you out.
Mostly I'm hiding these days. I got my head down. I'm working hard. I got my head down and things are looking up, as I say. But I'm at BillO'Hanlon.com, which is BILLOHANLON.com. And you can actually, I should do this since you're asking me this. The first two songwriting books are out. So,
yes, very cool.
Let's see. So the first one is called Song Building, and that was with Marty Dodson.
Marty Dodson, who has, we wrote one song together that's on my last record, and he also has another song on my last record.
On one of your records, yeah. And he's written 6 number ones and has hundreds of songs cut. And then Marty and Clay, who both runs Songtown, we talked about earlier.
Clay Mills, four number one hits with
six number ones.
Wow.
With Darius Rucker. Don't Think I Don't Think About It was one of them.
Yep.
Beautiful Mess with Diamond Rio, I think.
Classic.
The Songwriter's Guide to Mastering Co-Writing. We wrote that together, and Clay and I have just written another one that's not out yet. It's called Mastering Melody Writing. He's an amazing melody writer. And then Clay and Marty and I are writing one on the Songwriter's Guide to Mastering the Business of Songwriting. So that's it.
Phenomenal. All right. Well, everybody go check it out. Check out his books. Check out all of his work. Bill O'Hanlon, everybody. Thanks again, Bill.
Thanks for having me on the Charron Zone.